And the face is revealed. Hey, you. Oh, wait, you sound muted. Connecting audio. Almost there.
It's
Hey.
Cherry Blossom Festival in your house.
It's this backdrop I have. I hope you
Great.
don't mind that I start with recording. I like to get the initial hello face.
Get into
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Exactly. You are so air traffic controller voice
Oh,
right now.
totally. Name, you're clear to land. Perfect.
Excellent. Let's tell the divine. Divine,
Leave
please
all
join us.
ancestral trauma behind. No.
Fan-fucking-tastic. Exactly.
We didn't pay for the extra baggage, right? No.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
We could really use that. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh, I'm using it unless you're telling me
No,
not to.
no, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh my
That's great.
gosh. Oh my gosh. Ooh, now you coming in different. Ooh, coming
I
in.
can hear it. I can hear it differently now. Rocking and rolling.
Okay, so this is where I want to start with you. And if you want to
Interpretive
join me,
dance.
exactly. Because I think your story to coming into
Uh,
systematic constellation is
yes.
so
Awesome.
wherever you want to start with your who you are, say your
Hmm.
name because I'm always afraid I'm not getting the pronunciation correct.
Oh,
So
sure.
yeah, I'd love you to welcome all of us to
Yeah.
know who is in front of us, who is in front of the china table or the china.
The cabinet and the
Yeah,
blossoms.
yeah.
Well, I'm William Paul Miglino. I'm a junior, although my father has a different middle name. He's William Gerard Miglino.
Oh.
If we were being hyper Italian about it, it would be Miglino. You'd kind of roll the G into the L and make a sort of Y sound with it. I know, very, very fancy. We're only third generation, actually. I'm only third generation, so we're still relatively fresh off the boat in regard to American immigration.
Uh-huh.
Um, my journey to Constellation, that experience is an interesting one, definitely. I'll go the basics. Um, I was born to Bill, my father, senior, and Sue Ann. And I had an older sister, Christina, and then my younger sister, Olympia, was adopted.
Mm.
And I'm 2 years younger than my older sister, my bio sister, and then I'm 2 years younger than her, 3 years older than my sister, Olympia, who is adopted.
Hmm.
Um, the kind of like the thing that really got me to constellation work was actually through my mother,
Mm.
who um, okay, so my little sister was diagnosed with a severe disease. It's called collapsing glomerulopathy, and
Okay.
I know it's a mouthful, and it actually goes even one step further. It's a morphological variant of focal segmental glomerular sclerosis, FSGS,
Okay.
which is way more common. But then the collapsing glomerulopathy is a variant of that is uh, as far as I'm aware, still has no standard of like protocol of response
Hmm.
because it is still very much being studied. I know when I was doing a lot more research on it, the Mayo Clinic was kind of cutting edge, and they had no standard protocol for response.
Hmm.
Um, Also, this was diagnosed in a at the time 20-year-old girl.
Hmm.
Um, it had a gestational onset, so her kidneys began to fail during her first pregnancy when she was 16, 17, and then they failed completely during her second pregnancy. I should say second full-term pregnancy. She had had a miscarriage at one point in between as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
Um, and so by that second uh, pregnancy, 6 months in, her kidneys had completely shut down. Her blood levels became toxic and they induced labor. And so she actually had a little almost marsupial, gorgeous
Hmm.
child, Layla, who is um, now
Wow.
14 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
And she came out 2 pounds, 2 pounds and a
Wow.
few ounces. Yeah.
How do we
Wild.
spell determination? Spell Layla's
I
name.
know, just like that. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yep. Layla for sure. Um, and however, at that time, Olympia, my sister,
Mm,
started immediately on to dialysis,
mhm,
and lived the duration of her life on dialysis, seeing kidney specialists constantly.
mm,
Anyway, at the kind of onset of that illness, my mom had been doing research, um, kind of independently. I had been doing research for my own, kind of on the medical side. I get really into the science of it. I'm like, okay, what the fuck is actually going on here? Like,
mm,
okay, the kidneys are retaining protein, the fibers are hardening, the fibers are collapsing. There's like these very structural elements of like what a kidney needs to do to function that
mm,
weren't happening, and kind of the the disease has an initiating through the failure of the kidney, but then goes on to cause the gallbladder and
mm,
the thyroid, and most of the sort of um, the most of the systems of the body begin to shut down at one point or another, the autoimmune system.
mhm,
Um, and so my mom was doing research, kind of on the other like psychospiritual side of like, okay, what's going on? Um, her Olympia's birth mother, Tika, had also had the illness,
ah,
and she was currently living with it at the time.
mhm,
Although she did pass away during this time as well. Um, and again, medically, they didn't even know that it was genetic.
mhm.
It takes place. This takes place generally for um, African American men in their 70s plus with diabetes, so
I see.
comorbidity with diabetes. So it's like very um, that's where the majority of cases come up, and then now this gestational sort of onset in women is coming up more frequently now. They're realizing that there's some patterns displayed there as well.
Mhm,
So my mom is looking at, um, okay, if there's not information medically, then how is this held in the system? How is this being passed on to the
mhm,
next generations? Because clearly, if her birth mother had it and then she had it and the same exact structure of onset, like this is, you
mhm.
don't have to be a scientist to realize that there's some consistency
Ding, ding,
taking place
ding.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So what she ended up finding was family systemic constellations and
Mhm,
the carrying of, we'll say for simplicity, ancestral trauma or adverse experience
mhm,
in the nervous system, in the physical system, in the psycho-spiritual, however you want to look at that, and that being passed down to the future generations.
mhm.
Namely, the distinction between um, kind of our older Darwinian approach to evolution, which is to say that what's successful becomes prevalent because of the potential to progenerate is better because you're being successful because you have a bigger beak or you
Mm,
whatever
mm,
whatever it might be, that these little variations that occur in birth then create predominant um, traits, which then define species. The constellative approach and the epigenetic approach, which geneticists are now really coming to terms with,
mhm.
is that things that affect us throughout our lives can be passed on to our next generations as well, physiologically. And then in constellations, we take that to the next step and say that, um, and I'm using the term psychospiritual for some reason because I don't know exactly how to define it, but
Sure.
that's where it's kind of landing for me right now, is like whether we're holding on to this as a belief structure or it's being held within our kind of energy field.
Mhm.
There seem to be things that are playing out that don't belong to our lived experience.
Yes.
Um, and that was kind of through my mom's research. She found
Yeah.
a facilitator in Washington State. I was living in Chicago at the time. My father and my sister and her kids were living together in Washington. Um, And all of us, this was at a time when my younger sister was actually in the hospital. Christina, my older sister, myself, my mom, and my dad all went to a constellation workshop and set up our family system all together as a family, actually.
Yeesh.
I
Deep
know.
dive.
So we weren't the players, but we were watching, we were
I
witnessing,
see. I see.
and we did participate in other constellations. It was a whole
Mm-hmm.
uh, workshop. And for me, I had gone from this like small town, super open heart, really trusting, really loving, like stars in my eyes kind of a thing, to moving to Chicago at 16.
Mm.
Um, and like getting into fights, getting jumped, like getting beat up for no apparent reason, things like
Really?
that, where I was like, wow, okay, I cannot be so trusting. I cannot be putting myself out there in these ways. So I was like super hard building this thicker skin. Um, I found that even just looking back kind of objectively, I was more rude, I was more standoffish. I was just like building these guardrails around my physical body out of a
Mm-hmm.
need for survival, and then also my sort of emotional self. I was really out of touch with emotional expression, at least any semblance of healthy emotional
Mm-hmm.
expression.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's playing out kind of in my experience. My sister's getting sick. My mom and I are doing these separate kinds of research. We all come together, experience the family system constellation. Um, no, like there wasn't like a, oh, so this is why your sister's
Mm-hmm.
sick kind of a thing. There wasn't that like concrete moment of causal, we can see that this happened in this family, in this line 3 generations back, whatever. I could say there were certain things that were like, okay, um, that energy dynamic was really hidden, and now that we can see it, we all have a different relationship with it. Um, Even though I really strongly believe that we don't need to know someone to be able to empathize with them,
Mm-hmm.
um, there is something that happens with knowledge and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's like fabricated, like, oh, now I know something, so I can, you
Mm-hmm.
know, lean on it. Or if it's just like, oh, I actually had no reference point for this before, or
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think to look at it from this angle. I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea that this other perspective existed. Um, so it was kind of more ignorance that led to maybe judgment or lack of understanding rather than I think we can really desire to be loving and empathic and totally miss the mark all the same. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I speak for myself that I've been in moments where I was like, that was the nicest thing I could have ever said. And this other person's like, wow, you really hurt my feelings there. And I'm like, what did I miss?
Yeah.
Uh, and not for lack of care, but then again, in Constellation, similar. Like,
Mm.
I maybe had a care for, um, I am a very empathic and somatic person. I feel other people's feelings. I have my whole life. It's been hard to differentiate. I think that's also why protection was so important when I was
Mm.
younger. It's like, I can't go down your
Mm-hmm.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
I need to kind of stay in my journey, especially as I'm like being a teenager navigating that wild
Yeah.
ride.
Yeah.
Um, so getting into the room, playing different roles, I started to have this softening of
Mm.
um, emotion and holding and realizing that, like, okay, there are parts of my body that I don't need to be
Mm.
guarding all of the time, and maybe I do need to be guarding some of the time actually, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's safe and that's important, and you can't be emotionally vulnerable to every person on the street that you walk by.
Mm-hmm.
That is dangerous, right?
Mm.
So starting to get that kind of that pendulum swing back from super hyper vulnerable as a young person, teenager, early 20s, like hardening, kind of like more protecting, and now starting to realize, oh, there's like tools on both sides.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
um, and the resource gained by
Mm.
stepping into role, the resource gained by witnessing um, the way that harm can be held in a family system and proliferated unconsciously,
Mm.
um, and how even the people that are living in and expressing the harm don't want to be,
Right.
and it doesn't always matter that they want to or don't want to, but
Mm.
there's like there can be this maybe like a short circuit or static or something that is like, okay, the desired behavior versus the expressed behavior,
Mm-hmm.
it can be really hard to line them up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you're dealing with like traumatized people around you that are taking that as something else. So then the impact, forget
Yep.
again the desire to be
Yep.
nonviolent, the impact has its whole other thing.
Right. Right.
Um, so that kind of was these little explosions in my mind of like,
Mm.
oh, okay, this is very intriguing to me. What is it? What the fuck? Kind
Yeah.
of. Um, and also, can I find out more? Can I
Mm-hmm.
experience more of this? And so we experienced it as a family. Um, my sister had actually already coded at this point in time. She had already been
Mm.
considered at one point medically not living, right? There were
Uh-huh.
that happened multiple times in her experience. And so she had been in the ICU, began stabilizing with dialysis every other day, pretty
Mm-hmm.
on a constant need for that. Um, and I was living in Chicago, but was flying home to both visit and spend time with family and to experience more of these workshops. So I was trying
Mm-hmm.
to line up my dates of visiting to
Mm-hmm.
overlap like a weekend workshop. Um,
Great.
I would be remiss if I didn't share names. Mark Johnson. Mark Johnson was the facilitator who uh, was the first person that I experienced constellation work with.
Mm-hmm.
He actually recently passed,
Mm.
um, and so much respect for and appreciation for him in the um, he was very sure and also very um, loving with the way that he would kind of guide the constellative process. I think that there were moments where I was like, "Oh, you're very like,"
Uh-huh.
and so that sometimes it felt a little fast for me,
Mm.
but always with love and always willing to
Mm.
like take the moment if that means qualifying some information or allowing someone to integrate and just rest in the field for a moment. He
Mm-hmm.
was really, really attuned to that process. I'm super grateful for, um, with anything, the first time, like if you have someone who's kind of a dick or what, I don't know what, not that you find that a
Yeah,
bunch in constellations,
confronting. Yeah. Yeah.
but it can be your first experience is often like, do I come back to this again or do I not? And so
Yes.
I think he really cultivated a space for me to say, okay, there is opportunity here as a student. And then I started attending the primary facilitator that I studied under. Her name is Brigitte Stab. Um, she's an absolute sweetheart, a friend of mine, and
Mm.
someone I really care for in my life through to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I started attending her workshops. Um, at a certain point, I decided to move back to Washington to be with my sister and her kids.
Mm.
I transitioned. I had a career in ballet in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago. I was a professional ballet dancer for, at that point, 8 years, I think.
Mm.
Um, and I had done a little bit of moving in between, and I decided I had saved a little money, which is weird because in the dance field you're not making
Ah.
that much money. But I hustled. I always just
Mm.
I really put myself out there and did 30 or 40 Nutcracker performances every year, this and that, and just like really, really on the ballet grind, as it were.
That's just
Um,
not a sentence I hear often.
I know.
And fantastic. There's no judgment. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, how delightful. How many
Um,
nutcrackers you got?
Oh
Just
my God.
yeah.
I realize I'm like I touch on the 1,000 mark. I'm not sure if I've been in 1,000 productions of the Nutcracker, but
Oh.
I'm not actually sure. I don't know. It's
Do
in
you
the
have a
high hundreds,
favorite?
sure. I learned the Balanchine Nutcracker at a certain point because that was what my training moved to when I was 16, and then I performed mostly with Balanchine companies. However, I had the majority of my career as a guest artist doing private contract work or
Mm.
and so it was really there was a a company out in Pioneer Valley Ballet in like East Hampton, Massachusetts or something. And I would fly out there for like I
Mm.
would fly out on Sunday, be in the studio from Monday to Thursday, and then perform Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then fly out the following Monday. And it was just like an 8 week or 8 day contract, and it was awesome, and it was hard work, and it was like 6 shows or something over 3 days. And I really had a lot of fun with that one. And the
Uh-huh.
directors there were super cool. My partner was awesome. I do like 2 or 3 roles and kind of switch
Hmm.
it up in the performances. And that was just uh, one of the collaborators there choreographed it, and we just had a blast. I think it
Uh-huh.
was just so low stress.
Mm.
One, to be trusted with that, to show up on a Monday and to be
Sure.
like, we're gonna go over the choreography and get you performance ready in 3 days. It's like, okay, here we go.
Uh-huh.
It was a tour de force, but it was super fun.
Yeah.
Um, so that might have been my favorite. I should say the Balanchine Nutcracker is my favorite because of the legacy, but it's it's not. And the Nutcracker's just been dying for a revamp for a long time.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
Tchaikovsky is great. The scores are beautiful, and they're also like super racist and culturally appropriative and all that. And
Right.
I'm not the expert on any of those causes, but it's one of those ballets where you're like, okay, then this is the Chinese dance, and you're like,
Mm.
I don't
Mm.
know if that's a good call, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
not my decision to make, but it's a funny ballet for that.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, where are we going? Ballet, this, that. Moving back to Seattle. I guess yeah, I had been saving some money. I
Hmm.
moved back to, in this case, actually Bremerton, a town outside of Seattle. Moved in with my mom and sister and her kids. Started to become the part-time,
Mm.
half-time. I don't know. We didn't do it formally, so I wasn't the custodial parent, but I was doing 3 or 4 days a week with my niece and nephew,
Sure.
and then supporting my sister with dialysis and
Hmm.
emergency room visits. So it was like
Yeah.
a really intense year, approximately,
Yeah.
uh, where I hadn't been dancing much. I took a couple of jobs teaching and choreographing,
Hmm.
just like a few weeks here, a few weeks there,
Hmm.
um, but mostly dedicated my time to being. I'd say I like ran into the fire for some reason,
Mm.
but that was kind of the move. I didn't. I know that the life expectancy for people diagnosed with this disease was very low, and
Mm.
again, not really clear, not a lot of data. Um, but there's a bunch of different sort of prognoses built into this. So one is when your kidneys fail, what's the general lifespan for a person there? And it's under 7 years. It's almost unanimously under 7 years. It's
Hmm.
often less than that. If you get a kidney replacement
Hmm.
and your body accepts it,
Hmm.
you add on to that timeline.
Got it.
Um, Basically, any other circumstance is 7 or fewer years.
Got it.
If you do not get a kidney replacement, it's something like 2 to 4 years.
Oh,
And so even by the end of Pia's life, she had exceeded all of her sort of
Mm.
metrics, but she was a
Mm.
tenacious wild beast. Um, so I didn't know what to expect, except I knew that none of it looked very good, and I wanted to be able to spend time with my sister before
Yeah.
she was no longer in on this earth.
Yeah.
Um, and I also knew that I didn't have healthy outlet for my emotional experience, and I didn't have a lot of tools for how to um how to deal with what was going on internally for me, but then also how to show up for the people around me
Mm.
when the circumstances were pretty traumatic. Any given day could have been
Oh, right.
hours in the ER, or
Right.
multiple nights I would be woken up and we'd drive to the hospital, and that was just what needed to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and so I was doing a lot of bottling at the time.
Mm.
Kind of stuffing down my own emotional experience, which I think there is something there. I'm not saying we should avoid our emotions, but the way that I could show up for the person in front of me and the immense
Mm,
experience of what was going on there,
hmm.
uh, it again, I'm not advocating for ignoring your own emotional experience.
Yeah.
Um, Having a little buffer there for I know I can attend to myself later when I'm ready, and right now I need to show up for this moment and get shit done. There's
Hmm.
something really valuable to that
For
in
sure.
what I found anyway. Um,
It serves a purpose.
yeah, very again, like all of the things we're doing in our life is we're trying to use the tools that we have in front of us, and hopefully, if we can, let go of the ones that aren't
Mm,
serving us anymore,
mm, hmm.
or like only pick them up when we need it, right?
Hmm.
Like in my partnership today, do I want to be leading with I'm going to protect or I'm going to
Hmm.
not express my emotions because this person's emotions are more important than mine? Like, no, there's a time and a place for each
Hmm.
of the, there's a, I guess I'll say an ebb and flow.
Hmm.
But if I'm neglecting my emotional experience, then I'm not serving either myself nor my partner.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call that like a thing to utilize all of the time.
Mm,
But in a really intense moment when shit needs to get done, sometimes shit just needs to get done. And
yeah.
that's like the baseline. If survival is to be met in this moment, I can't
Hmm.
be freaking out over here. I actually need to
Yeah.
just like get things handled.
Well, that reminds me of like, in old-timey movies and maybe current presentations of art, it's like that slap when somebody's screaming. It's like
Shock them into like, yeah,
present moment,
presence. Yeah.
screaming, crying, releasing what's happening inside, not now. Yeah.
Right. And it's challenging because what do we have? Like fight, flight,
Right.
or freeze or fawn. I just learned that one now, not just learned that, but I've heard of that being used more. Is like we have these survival mechanisms, and that's fine. And um, I hate to think that it takes like trauma
Mm,
to be able to deal with things. I mean, like I don't think I would have known what
mm.
my capacity was without confronting it. I
Yeah.
just don't think that's kind of my how I think it works is like you find your edges.
Mm,
This is how it's worked for me in my life. I find my edges and I learn from that. I
hmm.
don't always have to cross over the boundary line, but I've definitely found myself where I have for sure.
Sure. Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and then the drawing it back and kind of finding, okay, well, that that is that's as far as I'm gonna go, right? I'm
Hmm.
not gonna not listen to my internal experience such that I'm gonna hurt myself dramatically because this other person needs something from me, right?
Right.
There is a balance there.
Yep.
There is a discernment that takes place there. And for me, it had to be experienced to really
Hmm.
learn.
Hmm.
Um, and then going back to constellations, now you've got I'm going to maybe like at this point a weekend workshop every few months,
Mm,
probably.
hmm.
And but they're long weekends. It's Friday 4 hours, Saturday 6 or 8, Sunday 6 or 8. So it's 20, 24 constellations in a weekend. I may set one where I'm the
Hmm.
client, the primary client. Um, and then I may, what I was finding, both being a younger man and being, you know, uh, male or assigned male at birth, um, I was kind of unique in the
Mm,
constellation world, at least
right.
at this moment.
Right.
So I found that I was utilized a lot. I was often
Right.
thrown in the mix. Oftentimes, I have to say, oftentimes as a perpetrator,
Ah.
it's a lot of time. Here we go, history, men in history, not always being the big gushy open hearts that we want to be, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time representing um, someone who generally was abused and harmed and who had
Hmm.
proliferated abuse and harm. And so that was a real,
Hmm.
um, it was a really deep sort of investigation with the judgment that I have on or
Ah,
for people who are creating harm. Um, and also for like my own, where I've had my own anger or
hmm
um rage or
hmm
whatever, like when those emotions that I wasn't really in tune with would get out of whack, that could be harmful for
Yep.
people.
Yep.
Um, and this, like, not making myself
Mm-hmm.
ashamed, but also acknowledging the value of learning from the experience still, and to
hmm
be accountable if I have hurt somebody. Um,
hmm
I'm not really, I have, I will fight for my physical health and safety. I'm not I don't want to harm people physically, but I can definitely, I've said things that are super hurtful.
Uh-huh.
I've used my words to create a lot of harm. Um, in those like very short-sighted moments of I don't know how to deal with this, and so I'm just outbursting
Yeah.
emotionally, expressing
Yeah.
in a kind of unhinged sort of a way. It's not my protocol. I'm a pretty loving, gentle guy,
hmm
uh, but I could see where um, my like desire to bottle up or to compress those emotions um, was because I didn't want to create harm, but then they would be
hmm
unregulated, and that's when they would come out and hurt somebody. So it's like
Exactly.
allowing the recognizing that, okay, I do have this capacity, and I can actually express myself really authentically and with integrity without it. um I can't say that I can negate all harm that I could possibly commit, but I can do it way more empathically, or way more with more compassion, let's just say.
Or
And I think
consciously,
there's
it
ways.
sounds like too.
Right. I can
Yeah.
maybe, for example, I can like ask Name, do you have space for me to ask this question, or can we look at this a little bit differently? I'm not really clear about what how this is landing, and I feel like
Yeah.
charged. I don't know, whatever it
Right.
might be, but like that little disruption between I
hmm
feel this way, and so
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
know.
Giving it things a pause, giving things some space.
A
Yeah.
little bit of space, and that like standing in the role of someone who had like murdered or raped or incest or whatever, like, oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
One, did I have so much judgment for those people going into it?
Right.
So
Right.
much judgment. These are bad people, inherently bad. They, need to be removed from society, need to be
Yep.
whatever. Um, I'm not saying we give a pass to people who are expressing in these harmful ways.
Yep.
Um, and I have so much more empathy for the young
hmm
self here who was harmed and didn't know what to do about it,
Yep.
and for the beings who decided the only way they could connect, because they freaking had to connect, was through proliferating harm. And
Yep.
even that, maybe their definition of love came from
hmm
harm.
hmm
And that was just what love looked like.
Right.
My parents loved me, so they beat the shit out of me. Like, okay, but that, like, but you can do it differently,
Right.
like,
Right.
and
But again,
unfortunately for me,
if
yeah,
there isn't that pause, it's gonna, yeah,
we just can't even help it, right?
yeah.
And I'm very fortunate in a way that my parents didn't
hmm
abuse me, and they were both beaten.
hmm
Like that was
Yeah.
that seems, from my understanding, seems to have been um maybe that time in history commonplace, but definitely
Yep.
for their families it was commonplace.
Well,
Um,
and then there's also that societal pressure. Like we're living in a different time, right? Like I find this when I look back at movies, I'm like, oh God, how did I like not cringe at this scene when I watched it 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever the scenario was. But it was this experience of this is what we're all agreeing is okay, or that we
it's
look the
okay.
other way, etc. So, it's kind of that theme of uh, I don't know how to talk about this poetically, but the pressure to bring home the bacon, to bring home the finances fell typically on one shoulder. And
Sure.
yet, what you were speaking to earlier, I'm a juicy love bug. Can I express
Yeah.
that way in my masculinity?
Right.
No, the kids need to be fed or blah 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 blah. And
Sure.
again, not naming that the trajectory of how things have gone were correct or what we would choose today, and just naming that there's more components. I mean, that's one of my love affairs with Family Constellation is it is a space for what else is here? What else is here?
Totally.
What
Totally.
else is here in the body, in the physicality? And I interrupted you, so if you want to go back to the thread
No,
you're
I
on.
I love that. I really resonate with that. I think that even goes directly to what I was talking about in that my mind began to open to new capacities.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not a child so much anymore. I was in my 20s. I was still pretty much a child, but
Well,
but
before
I have
your Saturn return, that's colloquially, I don't know, colloquially is the right word, but
yeah.
there's an agreement in some spaces that we're an adult when Saturn returns in one's system, which is around age 30. So back to what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
saying.
28 or so. Right,
Yep.
right.
Yep.
Um yeah, no, so revelatory in some ways of like one, I'm accessing emotions and I'm expressing from a different way.
Hmm.
Two, I'm experiencing resonance with people that I have judged really harshly in the
Yep.
past, and I'm starting to build empathy for myself and my own experience, which is to say, again, uh, don't take away the importance of when you impact someone that you need to be accountable for it, but recognize, like, hey, I can be accountable. I
Hmm.
can't, okay, and maybe if like with enough effort or enough time or enough practice, I can disrupt that pattern.
Hmm.
And that's,
Hmm.
I would say, like the biggest gift of the family constellation experience in my life, which went on into 3 years of pretty comprehensive training shortly after in the timeline I was sharing about my process training with Brigitte Stab in her learning circle,
Hmm.
Stab, sorry, for 3 years straight. And that was monthly 20, 25 constellations a month, basically. And
Yeah.
then the last year and a half was facilitating with her
Hmm.
support. Um, so pretty deep dive into it. Um, all the while expanding the capacity of feeling,
Hmm.
frankly. Like I'm a somatic guy. I couldn't discern so much. And this really helped me sit in my own, here's where I'm at today.
Hmm.
These are the kind of boundaries of my experience. And I'm gonna consciously allow for information to come in, to
Hmm.
be receptive to that information without it belonging to me.
Hmm.
Um, which that used in relationship in life, huge gift.
Hmm.
I'm gonna sit with this person who it very practical. I'm gonna sit in the hospital room with this person who's in immense pain. I I cannot just be in immense pain with them.
Hmm.
Um, I can empathize, I can feel and acknowledge their feeling is taking place. And can we commute that to love? Can we commute that to
Hmm.
um, let's breathe together? Can we calm the nervous system a little bit? But can I
Hmm.
really be conscious of it being in this moment and also choose some other tools
Yeah.
to bring forward? Um, Goes back to that. Can I have that moment of pause between the experience and the reaction to the experience?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that is something I have probably I always wanted to have like great examples for that around me, and
Ah,
I didn't find that many. I
yeah.
definitely could see certain people. I would be like, oh my God, the values that you're expressing are so beautiful. I want to emulate that. I want to um be screamed at and to respond with I hear you and I don't have space for that right now.
Mm.
Whatever, I don't know, whatever that like potentially healthy moment of expression would be, instead of like, well, I can yell louder and get bigger or something.
Can I pause
Yeah,
you for a moment? So
please. Yeah,
something really strong is coming in.
please.
If I can be bold and say, will you facilitate a FC container that does just that? Like what I'm getting is like a workshop or a series or something where the point of it is not for us to be in our dragon fire of expression, whatever that emotionality is,
Yep.
rather, because I think where I'm headed or what feels like is here to
Yeah.
speak about is I feel like we can do that like intellectually. And again, what I appreciate about Family Constellations is that embodiment moment. And I do
Totally.
want to name, so I'm gonna, because there's a couple things I wanted to jump in, but I didn't want to be that asshole who's interrupting you. So
Well,
pause.
I'm a talker, so
I
please don't.
love
I
it.
appreciate the pause, the redirect. I'm game for it. So yeah, please continue.
But the piece I really hope that you're honoring for yourself, and I want whoever's engaging with this conversation um, to hear is I've done family constellations with a number of people. All have had their beautiful gifts. What
Yeah.
I'm really what I find gorgeous about how you're facilitating these containers, I can say other reasons, but the one that's tethered here to this moment in our conversation is the fact that you were a ballerina. And I don't know if
Hmm,
ballerina is the term you would use.
I'll
Um,
take it.
but to me, how beautiful that you had that foundation to then build on embodiment,
Mhm.
and I feel like we could also go to cosmically, spiritually, your guides. How did you get yourself? I don't think we have time for that in this conversation, but to me, it
Fine.
feels like there's a following that you've
Mm,
done
mm.
around getting you here. There's a lot of consciousness, there's a lot of integrity, there's a lot of, oh, I want this to be different. I want this to be more of that juicy, yummy heart space in my relating with others. So, and the other piece I wanted to interject or put in the space,
Yeah.
and I can always edit if you're like, Name, that's a no, um, is you as a choreographer.
Mm,
Because what I'm curious about is when you're constellating, you've got your
yes.
notebook. I do want to talk about like the tradition, whatever, the different versions of constellation. But
Yep.
I find so brilliant when I'm in space with you, it's like the director thing, and I'm writing stuff down. And so there's choreography, like this wasn't
Uh-huh.
your age necessarily, but I grew up with the TV show Fame. I
Yep.
started as a dancer as a kid, and that
Awesome.
show terrified me to no end. The whatever that stick was that she would pound on the
Marking
ground.
out the counts. Yeah, totally.
Oh
I
no,
had
just like
I
it's
had
wrong.
directors like that. Oh yeah,
Like
yeah. Yes.
and so what I'm wanting to like make sure is understood when I say choreographer, I haven't experienced you as a ballet or a dance performing
Sure.
choreographer. And I've been in container space with you, like this last one that we were in. I was like, motherfucker, I'm gonna kill somebody. Like the teeth, like I wanted
Totally.
to,
Yeah, yeah.
like maybe
Right.
you sensed that and you
Definitely.
were Dragonfire Name is coming. Oh, what else is possible? So I'm really hoping you're hearing that
Cool.
there's so much breath of beauty
Mm.
and graceful, heart, compassionate, yet you are so, how I experience you in those containers, so in yourself,
Mm, mm,
as well as well, I don't know. Let's test this out. Let's be curious together. Let's see. And I trust you. And
right.
where can this evolve to? So now I don't remember what I paused, but I want you to have
That's okay
space
because
to come
let's just roll with where you were going because I mean, as you were kind of referencing, I'm a big fan of going where the energy is. So,
in.
um, and what you were just saying, I think does relate to, um, like I better now than at other times in my life, I can hold space for someone in the middle of a panic attack. I can
Oh,
I can be I can differentiate my own body and space and still show up and attend to their needs in that moment
yeah.
without feeling like I'm neglecting my own. Um, I'm saying that because it's similar to what you're describing. Like, okay, so Name's role is clearly in need of something right now, whether
Mm,
that's expressing this thing, whether that is to be acknowledged, whether that is to maybe find resource or to receive differently than the receiving. I don't know. It could be infinite things probably,
yeah.
but I'm not letting that
Hmm.
determine my behavior.
Hmm.
I'm gonna sometimes we'll put a pin in this moment. I do this more now, and my teacher Brigitte would do this too. There's maybe a big dynamic going on over here, and I've worked with facilitators who are like, "Oh, let's go there. We're jumping
Right.
into that dynamic right now." More often nowadays, I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna focus over here where there's not much energy moving because this energy is moving." And
Hmm.
the like cosmic intelligence, the morphic field around what's taking place. There's so many different ways we could kind of talk about the intelligence that is held in the
Hmm.
world, but in a constellative sort of environment.
Hmm.
I believe that that intelligence is greater than my individual intelligence. And so I'm going to sometimes leave space for Name to seethe. And I'm not saying I want you personally to be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes um like sometimes we have to let the fire burn
Hmm.
a little while before we can see like what other needs are not being met here.
Yeah.
What other what other as you were saying opportunities or possibilities exist here.
Hmm.
Um I don't always know. So and I say this to everybody, in a moment of conflict, if you can show up with curiosity over judgment,
Mm.
your life will change. Your freaking life will change because
Yeah.
it's not enough to say I'm right because you're being mean.
Yep.
I need to be curious about the mechanisms behind my justifying my behavior and judging your behavior. Like there's so
Hmm.
many different ways that we
Yeah.
can investigate this. And like, all right, so this role, this person representing this thing is really like out of whack. I don't know what the right term
Hmm.
is. Um, why is that expression so important to them?
Right.
Where is it that this sense of self is being held on to still? Where is the opportunity for this person to feel honored and acknowledged and seen for what they are bringing to the table and allow them to find a new way of showing up, allow them to, yeah, relate differently.
Well, and the other tether, so I was talking about this workshop idea, but
Yes. Oh, yeah.
the tether is that I'm tracking is in real life outside of the
Sure.
container.
Outside of a workshop. Yeah.
It is somebody saying, what else is here? Because there is that societal experience. I was referencing it before about bringing home finances or bringing home
Sure.
resources. But there is this experience of day-to-day life that's like, get it done, 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 rather than, hey, I'm not seeing you take a big belly breath in an hour. Do you want to
Totally.
talk about what's happening, what you're experiencing? And then what's the container around that conversation?
Right.
So there's so much trust that I'm feeling towards you as a facilitator because of that. Anyway, we've constellated what, three times, I think. And
Hmm.
I feel like I can lean or I can, and you're with me in all of those moments in a way that I experience you holding yourself, as well as supporting, facilitating me finding how I can support myself. So that's the kudos and reverence to you as a
I
facilitator.
love that. Well said.
And going back to the this workshop idea, and I'm not attached, and I likely would sign up because it feels amazing, is
Yep.
this piece of can we practice in this container? Because
Yep.
that's the other thing that I'm wanting to highlight in this theme is it's it's not my experience to find many times where we can walk into a place of curiosity and know that the me who needs to pay my rent isn't jeopardizing the relationships that support me being able to pay my rent by being curious and following where the energy goes.
And there's some real practical needs that we all have, right? And there are some moments where I'm like, you know what? I want to be able to spend 6 weeks in the woods. I don't know, whatever. Let's just say, right?
Yeah.
I love nature. That is my respite. I
Hmm.
living in Santa Fe is such a gift to me because I can walk out my door or I can drive an hour and I'm in a, a very natural, gentle kind of setting. That
Yeah.
really supports my nervous system. But yeah, I got a life. Okay, I got these fancy headphones. No, I have things though that I actually a friend gave these to me. So even more than that is just the abundance of relationship
Mm.
and love and joy. Um, but yeah, I've got really practical. I can't. Maybe I could say objectively, like we should be able to uh be unfiltered 24 hours a day. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
unfiltered 24. I don't know exactly what that means for every person, but we have all of these societal structures around us that we can be in conflict with, we can be okay with. It doesn't even really matter. They're existing, they're
Yeah.
strong. There are expectations that we hold from that don't always transcend culture. Sometimes this culture holds this ideal, this
Yeah.
culture holds this ideal. Sometimes our society actually even pits those against each other for more leverage in different demographics or different groups. But pretty much across the board, you can't be checked out all the time, or you can't be
Mm.
only in your feelings all the time. You can't really be only in your head all the time either, at
Right.
least if you're me. I think we glorify that largely in our society. We're like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, they've got their shit together always.
Right.
That seems like a really good thing, right?
Right.
That doesn't work for me. I have a partner who lets me fall apart. I have friends
Hmm.
that I can be just like make a mistake in front of and it's okay.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, that's really important. That's a need that I have.
Yeah.
Um, and so we have people who are, I don't know, I've heard different expressions like star seeds, people who are like
Mm.
very much in the kind of atmospheric
Hmm.
resonance, so to speak.
Yep.
And like they'll often tell you that their goal, their challenge is to be grounded, is to be physically in the moment, in the space, enjoying the delicious meal. I don't know, enjoy
Yeah.
being with the conversation and the people directly in front of them, feeling the warmth of the fire versus being in this like super meta systems and analyzing big like um even maybe nonlinear thought process.
Yep.
Those people often are wanting a little bit of tethering.
Hmm.
I'm a really, really earthy, grounded, super kind of person. Constellations is one of the places where I get to practice that connection with my body and a complete release. I can be like, you know what? I don't have a fucking clue what's happening next to you guys, and I love it. And I'm so excited. I have
Right.
no clue, right? Um, and I ask questions as a facilitator. I will say this is I don't think that I don't think it's valuable for me to act like I don't know what's going on all the time, and I don't try to do that. But I do like to leave the space for I don't know what's coming next because
Yeah. Yeah.
I want there to be opportunity there. And I think there's a balance. I It doesn't feel supportive to me when a facilitator is like,
Yeah.
know it, no, like I can be really sure that there's a process here that I'm relying on and leaning into that I'm really intimately connected with and understand,
Hmm.
even though the material within that process, I have no like all bets are off as
Yep.
far as where that could go or where that's coming from. Um, but I do a couple of things differently than what I've seen or experienced. And that is to say, I know there are other people doing similar things. We've
Mm.
got billions of people in the world. I'm sure there are. But the like, and I will do it sometimes where I'll physically set people into
Ah.
space because I want them to try out something that they haven't tried out yet. So I will be a
Hmm.
little bit hands-on directing at times. But to your point, I'm drawing this tether now. Choreography is a
Mm.
systems view of an organism, and that organism, let's say it's a 14-minute score or ballet or something, whatever
Yep.
scene. Um, you have the music, the space, the bodies. You have the language of the movement, you have the language of the music, you have time, you've got duration, you have all these different types of expression. And where we can fall in love with an individual in a moment with a particular expression, it is because of the greater context that that moment can even occur.
Exactly.
And in a way, in constellations, I really feel comfortable holding a systems view, whether that's the room we're in, let's just say the content of the room that we're in, and then the emotional, metaphysical content taking place there, while I'm sitting next to you and inquiring
Hmm.
about how you are, and maybe even dipping into the energy field that you're connecting with or the representative that you're connecting with. Um, or to another person while this is happening right here, this can still happen right here and maturate and change and inquire and assert even or whatever's going on, um, while being really present with this moment.
Hmm.
It's kind of like that. I call it a tacky expression. It's a beautiful expression, but like the drop is the ocean, or the what, do you know what
I
I'm
don't know
talking
that
about? Like,
one. No.
yeah, the ripple is the wave. Like this
Oh.
idea of like the individual is also the collective. The
Hmm.
Our behaviors are indicative of our society or are indicative of our genetic code or our makeup. Like the drop of water is not only a part of the ocean, but it actually is the ocean. These
Yeah.
are kind of like mutually defining, so to speak.
Hmm. Hmm.
I feel that way in constellation work, where it's like the aspect that we're looking at is also the definition of the whole.
Hmm.
Um, and so you can find out more by zooming in really close, and you can
Right.
find out more by pulling back really far away. And that it's almost like a
Hmm.
fractal.
Hmm.
You get closer and closer and closer. It's reflecting what it looks like when it's further and further and further.
Yeah.
Um, and I have a lot of space for that. I have a lot of space for someone in front of me saying, that's nothing like what I feel like right now.
Hmm.
I'll ask someone a question. We've had that moment where I ask you, does it feel like this? You're like, not at all, actually. And and I genuinely, I will say I don't care. It's not that I don't care
Uh-huh.
that we find out. I do care that we find out or that we
Right.
investigate. But I actually think that asking a question that someone can consciously say, no, that's not it, is so valuable, because if
Hmm.
I can decide what something isn't, I can get closer to contextualizing what it actually is.
Right.
And so a lot of facilitators will say, all right, now here's your line, say your line, do this, assert this to this place. Sometimes I'll do that, like the I see
Hmm.
you, the acknowledgement of being.
Hmm.
There's pretty much no way to approximate that. Like, I see you as one of the most powerful things that we ever
Yeah.
do in constellations work, which is just
Yep.
acknowledge what is,
Yep.
acknowledge what is. You don't have to be different. I see you right now in your entirety. You can be that. It's hard to get to the same place in a different way, I think. I'm sure there are other ways, but that is one of the like unlocking sort of mechanisms. Totally translates to interpersonal dynamics, totally translates to you're having a shitty day at work and you want to be, you just bawling on the floor. I don't know. You want to be whatever you want to be doing. And it just that internal acknowledgement of the self.
Yeah.
This is true right now. That
Right.
is okay.
Right.
You are still, you get to be whole in this feeling and this expression. Now we have the potential for there to be more. We
Well,
like quarantine that. Oh, just
mm,
stuff those emotions down, or no, actually that's too big for me right now, which is valid. Sometimes it is too big for people and you have to advocate for your needs. But in like partnership, for example, internal self relationship, like, oh yeah, this is huge for you. Oh, this
right.
is totally freaking overwhelming and you have no idea what to do with this. That
Right.
is okay. Okay.
Well,
We
and
know that.
to your point of what you were speaking to about like here, will you as the representative speak these words? And then
Yes, right,
there's
right.
the yes or the no. Like
Yeah.
we had a couple of, I say we as in you facilitating me in the role
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
where I remember it was like because I was in role, because I knew this was a not Nameh relating with William, it was,
Yes, yeah.
because in outside the container, I might be like, you know, do what this kind person said because of, relationship dynamic and I want to be agreeable. I don't want to blah, blah, blah. And what I appreciate
Totally.
about the container or family constellation work is like, what is the body informing? So, uh, and again, I'm seeing this as a gift outside of the container of, oh, I get to practice. I was offered these words. Those don't feel exactly what I can say and stay in resonance and alignment to myself. I'll say this.
Yep.
And anyway, so that in itself also has its magnifying or amplifying experience post the family constellation container. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
And
that, yeah, for anyone who's
yeah,
watching this who isn't familiar with the structure of the family
thank you.
constellation, when we're stepping into role, or let's say there's an issue, and the issue is that this was a real issue that I've confronted in my own constellation work, that I am afraid of my anger, I
Mm,
bottle it up, and the only time it comes out is when I'm like disconnected from feeling, and it comes out in harsh and harmful ways. I've looked at that really, really deeply, actually, and um perhaps, let's say for my experience, I have my family system being represented. In this case, my father line, more or less. That's where the rage kind of comes from. So we're having representatives step into role as my father's father. I think we probably went back 6 or 7 generations all the way
oh well.
back, including some of the um, people that they had experienced in their lives and some of the harm that had occurred between them, including going through the world wars, actually. So there's a few different places of impact in my own experience. I wouldn't talk about another person's constellation at this in depth, but for myself, I feel like years removed, I can.
Hmm.
Um, a facilitator may ask for the person representing my great grandfather to say to their son, um, let's say like, oh, I'm proud of you, for example. That's a big one between uh, parents and their kids, but um, or you can show up how you need to.
Hmm.
I have space for you to be to
Mm,
your fullest capacity. A facilitator might try to phrase that in a particular way for the participant in order to sort of unlock a energetic or a physical connection between them, healthy connection between them. And the representative, who's a real human, could respond with, that doesn't feel true.
hmm.
That doesn't feel right to me. And maybe for them, they needed to say, um, I don't know, any number of other things, right? And oftentimes what I find is that the way I word something is just differently than the way another person would word something. And when they say it, it kind of is almost the same thing anyways. Like that
Yep.
happens all the time where it's not the same, because I think the way we relate to the words we're using is actually just really important. And so if a person can't relate to the way I worded something, I don't want them to say that then. I want them
Right.
to say it in their language, even if the impact is quite similar. Or
Yep.
I've had people be like, well, that's not what it is. And then they'll say it and then they'll be like, oh, I guess that was what it was. But it doesn't matter, because the important thing is this person is acknowledging, let's say
Yep.
acknowledging or creating relationship with another representative in the constellation, and they're feeling the connection to that acknowledgement. That's what I
Yep.
think is really important, because then you can be very subjective about that. And you
Hmm.
can have an internal, Name can have an experience for yourself, even though you're in role
Yeah.
in something that you haven't necessarily lived that experience, but you've had dynamics with people that are similar. You've
Yep.
had maybe internal dynamics with yourself that are similar. You can build or grow a compassion or a new type of understanding.
Hmm.
And maybe even, I don't know if it's directly translated, but maybe even some verbiage to bring to the table for
Mm.
yourself or
Hmm.
for, the next time I'm in the circumstance and I'm sitting here hating this person in front of me, maybe I can say, like, oh, I really understand.
Right.
You're super pissed right now.
Hmm.
And like, it's not, you don't have to know what to do with that.
Hmm.
But like, how bad is it when you have a really strong emotion and the person in front of you is just not getting it? And
Right.
they're just like, they don't, not only do they not understand, but they're like, I don't even really have space. I can't really see you or deal with you in this moment. Maybe they're advocating for their needs and that's a time that they need to do that. But in like
Hmm.
the big scheme of long-term friendship, relationship, family,
Right.
we can't just be dismissing someone every time they feel something strongly.
Right.
There's it's not a really functional way to endure in a relationship.
Well, and to the point of, try these words on, like I've had
Yeah.
facilitators kind of say that, and
Yeah.
to what you're pointing to of like, well, I tried it, I didn't like it, here's my variation. And oh, look, that actually holds the same energy as what you were originally offering. It's
Mhm.
almost like there is that I want to say like morphing, or there is that evolution that that person can experience potentially in real time, so that then there becomes that anchoring again of like, oh, okay, what you're talking about of, oh, maybe I can feel more aligned with trying this in another space because I had that practice.
Yeah.
And there's another phrase that I haven't actually experienced um in the spaces that I've where you've facilitated,
Mhm.
and that's the I give this back.
Yeah.
And so maybe before we go there, I'm curious if, because we've had like a lovely nonlinear abstract
It's been
conversation.
totally abstract. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm wondering, I'm actually thinking like maybe I'll cut this part and put it at the beginning. And so anyway,
Sure.
I'm doing
Fun.
a little bit
Yeah.
of my, editor choreography.
Uh-huh.
We'll
Uh-huh.
see. But the in my mind, there's two different versions that I've experienced. There's the what's a dynamic in a system, so my family, you spoke about
Yep.
it about anger,
Yep.
and I'm going to bring that to the container, and then people are going to be represented. And
Yes.
then the person who's being constellated or experiences being constellated is like stepped out watching all of this happening so they can
Yes.
get that bigger perspective.
I would call
That's
that like the traditional family systems
I
constellation.
wanted to use
Yes.
traditional, but I was like,
That's
maybe
what
that kind of puts a judgment on it.
I
Um,
think that's what Bert Hellinger, who is
ah,
considered to be the founder. Now there were other people involved in the um in this as like a conceptual
mm,
approach to health,
uh,
holistic health.
oh, okay.
And Bert Hellinger was basically the person who built the form in
Mm,
in a like, again, I'll say the traditional form of approaching a family system as the place where most of our baselines are established, most of our
hmm.
behavioral patterns are established, most of our how we respond to surprise, how we respond to health, how we respond to sadness, how we respond to love, how we give it. That basically, I would go with the traditional
Mm,
mother father line, looking at the lineage and what sort of has been held
yep.
in. Like I mentioned World War II, that's a time in history where any of the cultures who are really directly involved with that are holding a particular big
Mm,
trauma, right?
mm,
Whether
mhm,
they were perpetrating or whether they were on the
yep.
uh, any side of that. Anytime there's a lot of loss of life, there's closing of the heart, and then
Uh-huh.
there's disconnection of relationship and needs not being met.
Yeah.
Uh, and then other types of constellations, which we've been doing more. How would you more like concept or I don't know,
Well,
how would you qualify it?
Yeah, it's like how I've explained it to people where I'm like, you want to come try this? Is
Yeah, yeah.
I'll say, um, and this on this YouTube channel, I'm just noticing for myself, I keep referencing Family Constellation almost every interview.
Cool.
So
Uh-huh.
that's why I was so grateful you were like, let's do this. Um,
Yeah.
so in the constellation experiences that I've experienced with you facilitating is it's a check-in and it's well, what are you coming here to what are you coming here holding? What are you coming here potentially wanting to look at? So that's you facilitating that conversation or inviting that question. And then as people have their sharing, director choreographer notebook happens through you, or my witnessing of you.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like, oh, I'm hearing this theme. So,
Yes. Right, right.
so to what you were saying about concepts, I think it is concepts, and I think it's relational concepts.
Totally.
And so so say I come in and say, I feel like I can't really live my fullest life. So then we're looking at, is that motivation? Is
Yep.
that fear? And
Yep.
then you're facilitating the conversation of like, hey, this is the list I came up with. How does this land with you?
Yep.
And then from there, so if we're looking at traditional family constellation, it's father, mother, sibling, blah, blah, blah. In
Generally
your
speaking, yes.
version,
Yeah.
it's the okay, so we've decided fear represents what this person came
Yep.
or kind of stone that they put in the pond. And
Hmm.
then ambition, that's
Yep.
the other one. And so then
Yep.
those become the representatives that
Yes.
somebody embodies. And what I love about this new to me version of family constellation work is everybody can access it more consciously because I
Yeah.
think the traditional one there is a connection to, well, I know what it's like to have a family member scream at me, maybe not that version of a person,
Sure.
but that traditional, I'm on the wrong side, I think it was over here when I was talking about traditional, but um
So we're
I need
back to
like a
dancing.
graphic,
That's
yeah.
good. Yeah, yeah. Bing. Right.
But the other, so this to me feels like we can all step in this way without needing to align with the story of that family or that system that maybe in traditional is asking about.
It occurs to me, or it has occurred to me on numerous occasions when working with clients, because I do still
Mm,
work with the traditional structure.
mm,
I do
hmm.
one-on-one constellations with stones, where the stones are the representatives and we're
Oh,
intuiting, empathizing what's taking place within those dynamics. Um, but just like the family system is not traditional anymore.
yeah,
Like they're just like that inherently in our lives. Like, okay, well, I've got three dads and a mom and a what I don't know, whatever. Like
right.
or I've got like non-binary people that I relate with, or
Totally.
I've worked with. I have a person in my network that I've worked with who they're like these are the people that I admired, I looked up to, the role models in my life, whether they were tangible and they could point to and say this is the person, or they were conceptual. And we worked with like cosmic relationship and lineage. And that
Hmm.
and so like we were doing lineage where it was more like style of expression of self rather
Yeah,
than inherited,
right.
uh genetic, predisposition
Yeah.
or passing down. Um, and so yeah, I like to break down the structures. The thing that brought me to the
Mm,
style of constellation work that I'm doing in these workshops, um, I have taught dance a lot.
hmm.
I and from 4 years old, creative movement. God bless whoever does that because it's not for me, but I've done it for a few years. I did it and it's adorable and it's totally makes me crazy. So I don't do that anymore. But all the way up to professionals, I've worked with dancers from all these different levels. And young people have a sensitivity that I know I had growing up, but it was not honored when I was
Yeah.
growing up. It was
Yeah.
not acknowledged for being a value. It was like stiffen that upper lip. Like that phrase, like absolutely. I was doing ballet. I was beat up for being a
Mm.
gay ballet dancer when I'm actually like, first of all, who cares what my sexual preference is? But it didn't even, the narrative didn't even add up to the self, right? And so
Uh-huh.
like I found like I'm having to conform in these ways that are
Right.
super detrimental that thank the Lord, thank whomever, that young people don't have to do quite so much.
Yeah.
I think there are still plenty of ways where that happens, and it's different for different cultures and different races of people where they
Hmm.
have to give up parts of themselves to try to fit in.
Right.
One thing I've learned from teaching young people is that they're not dismissing their experience as much.
Oh,
They're
lovely.
they're gonna be they're if they need to freak out, then they're using that to
Hmm.
teach us how to show up differently to them.
Mm.
I'm
Hmm.
not saying it's always the most healthy way to express,
Yep.
but this concept of a trauma-informed approach to something, I
Hmm.
think we're never going to be able to figure out how to be non-harmful to
Mm.
everybody.
Mm.
But
Hmm.
we're trying and we're getting better.
Yeah.
But that's what led me to this. Okay, so traditional family systems, you have an issue that you would like to address. You look at the sort of genesis for that issue, where it lives in the lineage. It could be 5 generations back
Hmm.
that this person, closed their heart, started to withhold, stopped giving love freely to their children. And so this behavior pattern of harshness showed
Hmm.
up. Let's just
Hmm.
say as an example. You're going to the trauma point
Hmm.
and you're
Ah.
acknowledging the point of trauma. Sometimes, for example, I give back what I've been carrying for
Mm.
you. Super, super valuable thing. Like, you know
Huge.
what? I give back your harshness. I give back your criticism. I give back your hate, your anger, um, your self-doubt, your self-sabotage, whatever that is, that you can really consciously say, you know what? I've lived this behavior, but it does not belong to me.
Yeah.
You can give all of that back to the previous generations. And I think even just a practice for anyone listening, if you ever are by yourself in your home, out in nature, wherever you are, and you have behaviors that you really don't feel like belong to the lived experience that you've had, there isn't
Hmm.
like if you grew up poor and you have a poverty consciousness, that's very causal. I'm not saying that you can't give back some poverty consciousness from the ancestors, but if you grew up struggling, there's a reason why you built behaviors around trying
Hmm.
to not struggle, right? Or
Yep.
getting stuck in that cycle. You can't give back your lived experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can give back the behavior patterns that have contributed to it or came from those before you.
And I
Um,
will also add, maybe you were going there and I'm jumping ahead
yeah,
of your thought process, is
I'm down. Yeah,
in that giving back,
yeah.
because what I think is so beautiful when that I've seen or experienced that happen in a container is it's the giving back with love. You
I give
know?
it back with the same love with which I took it. I mean, it's like
Yep.
such because the little people in the family system are saying yes.
Right.
When you were a child, when I was a child, and the
Yep.
grown-ups around me needed to be regulated emotionally, I
Yes.
said, "I love you. Yes, I will do that. I
Yes.
will be quieter. Oh, I was being too loud. Oh, I broke that toy and now I'm being yelled at and shunned and what I will not let that happen again. I
Right.
will adjust I will walk on eggshells. I will be
Yep.
cautious. I'll eat less. Like children just keep saying yes. They're like, "Oh, I love you." Of course. "Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be too much for you to handle." The baby that self-soothes at 18 months that
Right.
stopped crying, I'm not saying their parents are bad parents, but there's a reason why they're attending to their own needs because
Right.
they weren't getting them attended to externally.
Yep.
So there's like big reasons why we have these self-pacifying or self-soothing
Yep.
behavior patterns. Um, because as little ones we're just like, oh yeah, oh you can't handle when I'm out of control. I'm gonna not be out of control. Okay.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And
Um,
constellations can be one of those containers or one of those opportunities to shift, to
Yeah.
find another perspective, to have curiosity around what was this passed down, because we can learn it intellectually. I've learned things intellectually, and yet when it's not in my body, when it's not facilitated from a place of love and inner cohesion,
Yeah.
it can only have it, the ripple effects are limited, as opposed to when there's more of that gracious opening. Oh, I see more of this. Um, yeah, because the other piece that I want to be sure that we're naming, or I want said here is,
Mm,
and I'm curious, this is a question, so I'm going to say something and you tell me, yeah, I experienced that, or no, that's
totally.
totally
Yeah.
yours, is I've constellated as dynamic and then noticed the people who were being represented who didn't know what I was doing, they then were different,
Totally.
as well as cosmically. Like, I can't
Yep.
say that I sit down with my bio father and after having, in essence, a memorial for my twin that my parents didn't
Mm,
have consciousness of or
right.
verbalize or anything, I can feel a lightness in their system, because I think that's part of why we come to be humans as souls, or as whatever we would call ourselves. We come to be human to learn and evolve and shift and bring a new perspective. And once you're out of body, you don't really have that same experience. And so that could be its whole other layer that maybe we could pick up on a part two if you want to come back.
Sure, 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 sure. Cool.
Is
Uh,
that lineage piece, because I see it as the bio lineage
yeah.
and the cosmic lineage, because there's definitely past life lineage that I would love to FC about,
Sure.
because it's
Sure, sure.
showing up in this life, like how you were saying FC start Family Constellations started as a body connection, so there's a
Yeah.
health dynamic we want to look at it. Well, where does that come from?
That
I've
was my waypoint was like, why
Yeah,
is the body displaying these
right.
traumas in a physiological
which
way? Yeah.
which my perspective is, it's both potentially this life and or also all of the
Sure.
other times that we got to be, I don't like the word meat suit, but people use it. So
I
yeah.
often just to touch on that, I really relate to the idea that we are an expression of life force that happens to be in physical form right now. And so we have relationship with all of the prior incarnations of life force.
Yep.
So, and some people think of it or visualize it or have flashbacks to this time and this
Yep.
place and I was whatever had this interaction. And some people I think I can speak for myself. I find a more kind of broad, like I can absolutely relate with that thing, even though I don't have a physical reference point for it,
Hmm.
because I am a feeling body. I
Hmm.
can get close to that sensation that this person or this time sort of reflected. Um, what was your, can you concisely ask the question real quick again, just so I can,
The ripple
my mind is,
effects. Yeah, the
yes,
ripple
yeah, yeah.
effects that the people who are in the room,
Yep.
whether likely not consciously, um, that their experience can evolve because of the work that happens in the room.
Um, I say this to people, and I probably word it differently all the time, but I really believe that the practice of being in the body and feeling, allowing for information to come in,
Hmm.
if you only isolated that one practice, I believe that you're gaining tools for how you show up in your life.
Hmm.
If that is the only thing you're doing, which is one of the big parts of family constellations, is how do I discern, sometimes I say neutral, which I don't think it's exactly neutral, but where's my baseline? What's my energy baseline right now? What am I feeling in my body? I can tell you my shoulders are a little sore. I was working outside this morning, like I'm a little bit, and I would check in just like this in a constellation so
Hmm.
that when I step into role, I can notice, oh, well, one, my shoulders are totally at ease. So that's interesting because I was just physically exhausted before I stepped into this. Or the sensations start changing. When I can discern that in a safe held container like a constellation workshop with a facilitator that I trust or participants that I am aligned with, now I can bring that exact practice into another aspect of my life and say, my boss is yelling at me.
Yep.
Okay, well, I actually can attune to my own physical experience right now and I can create the space that I need to allow this person to have whatever maybe
Mm-hmm.
harmful or dysfunctional expression is taking place, but I'm not diving into the problem with them.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually resource myself and recognize maybe even also recognize that they have needs that are not being met right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does not mean that I have to be the person who meets all their needs, but
Yeah.
I can possibly um, allow for their expression to just be information. It's
Mm-hmm.
not personal. It's not because they hate me. It actually probably has nothing to do with me.
Right.
The majority of the time, other people's words and expressions are literally just, they're just calling themselves out constantly. They're just
Mm.
displaying where they're at constantly, or I'm displaying where I'm at constantly. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, really not about the other person, even though we maybe like reflect traumas with each other, or we will do that, right? Where like this thing that so and so said really spiked this feeling in me. Um, Probably because that is an unresolved issue that I have in myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the constellation space is a space where there's very little like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to lose your job because you like
Ramifications. Yep.
went into a similar construct as to what you experienced with your boss and practiced communicating in a different way or practiced a
Yep.
different style of approach that maybe also didn't work that well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you got to trial it out. You got to play through it
Mm-hmm.
in like a pretty safe and like yeah, non maybe long-term impactful way, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
blowing up your work. You're still making
Right.
your mortgage or your rent or your
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You can still get your pumpkin spice latte for the holidays or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Not that I drink a pumpkin spice latte, but
Well,
okay, one thing to
yeah, go
yeah, yeah.
ahead. No, go for it.
Well, I just wanted to tether the I was talking about the trauma informed approach. The
Mm.
reason why I've been doing the constellations the way that you were sharing is because one, I believe in collective intelligence. I believe that a group of 12 people sitting in a circle together are going to know more than I'm going to ever come up with by myself. So
Mm-hmm.
for me to tell somebody what to address in their life
Mm-hmm.
just seems short-sighted to me. Very simple. I believe that like you are actually going to know, even if you have a way, and this is where my director pen and pad kind of comes out, even if your whole conversation is um let's say I'm working with a client who I might deem as like being pessimistic, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everything they say is, and then this problem is on top of this problem is on top of this problem is on top of this problem. And I might write notes that are words that they haven't said the whole time.
Yeah.
But they're a behavioral, they're an energy associated with a type of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So I might write down self-doubt. I
Uh-huh.
might write down something like harsh critic. I don't
Mm.
know. I'm sure, right? But I might write down something that's behaviorally being expressed, even though the places that they're talking about something completely different is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm trying to look for is I'm trying to look for three, four, five, six, seven, whatever, however many layers beneath.
Ah.
Say the behavior is up here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look at I didn't get the needs met that I needed when I was 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out that this expression that is happening way up here is actually associated with my, I didn't have a role model that demonstrated how to assert the needs that I had that weren't being met so that I could help get them met, much less if they're not being met outside of the self to attune and attend to them to myself.
Yeah.
So I want to look at that mechanism because when we start fucking with that, like what you were talking about before, noticing changes in other people,
Mm-hmm.
well, we're defining all of the people around us,
Mm.
right? So the way that someone is able to show up is because I've already created a box for them to show up in.
Uh-huh.
So I maybe didn't even see this part of them that was right here the whole time.
Uh-huh.
But when I started practicing finding access points to myself, my own experience, my own
Mhm.
expression that is different than what I expected,
Yeah.
I start to recognize that in other people too.
Nice.
And that can be beautiful. And that, like, I have also had clients be like, I haven't talked to my mother
Hmm.
in 6 years, and she just called me. And
Right.
we just did a constellation last week on the mother line, and my mom called me. Like, okay, what the hell is going on? Was it causal? I have no idea,
Right.
but something obviously changed. And
Right.
maybe it was happening for them in their life all along the way. But whatever it is, you are at a different place for you now,
Yep.
and she's at a different place for her now. A different kind of relationship can take place.
Well,
It's
and it's
pretty cool.
yeah, something that's in my life now, like
Yeah.
real time this week is I'm in a bump with somebody and energetically I feel their back to me.
Yep.
And that's something that what I've understood in the constellation work, you're looking at body posture. So if somebody's lying down, what does that
Big
say?
part of it.
All those things. And so if I were to constellate that dynamic, might their energy turn towards me because I opened up something where they didn't feel like they needed to. Anyway, to your point, we may not know all of the whys and the hows, and
Right.
there might be attraction of like, oh, okay, something's different. Something's
Yep.
different. Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, as we wind down,
Yeah.
if you want to articulate what you offer, so we're
Yeah.
referencing this experience that's happening monthly in, just close to Santa Fe. It's, a little bit
Yep.
outside of Santa Fe.
Yeah, just
But,
outside Santa Fe. Yeah.
but yeah, just, because somebody might listen to this and be like, I need some William in my life.
Totally. Um, so for local people to Santa Fe, once a month at the Tsuke Roundhouse, I do a 3 hour workshop, and we do, I'll say it's kind of like a crowdsourced constellation structure, right?
Why
Where
not?
everybody shares what is pertinent to them, and then we'll look at those dynamics. This on the 10th of November, actually coming right up. I am being a little bit more guiding. I want to look at leadership dynamics as
Mm,
we're election is taking place. There's just a lot in my sphere, but it seems like I'm from a lot of people like
mm,
one leadership responsibility impact, how that plays out on a kind of higher up if we're looking governmental or systems
mhm,
kind of expression of it, as well as ourselves. Like for me to have um to feel like I can have some true impact over my sphere of
mhm,
influence, however large or small that is, feels important to me. I don't
mhm,
I don't want to feel like I do believe that there's cosmic shit happening all the time, and like I don't control almost anything, but I
mhm.
like to feel that if I shoot love at something hard
Uh-huh.
enough, long enough, that there's some positive recourse or impact or
Mhm.
long-term outcome. So I do want to still feel like I have influence. I do want to
Yeah.
still feel like I have some power, actually. I
Mhm.
think people in their lives uh we do often take the line of the victim, like, oh, and then this
Mm.
happened to me,
Yeah.
that happened to me. Um, I think there is sometimes a fear of our ability that comes
Mm.
into there.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's almost easier to say that this was out of my control
Yeah.
rather than to say, like, oh, I actually kind of had a hand in creating this.
Yeah.
Oh, and if I really do want it to be different, I actually
Mhm.
could put a new effort into the situation, and that could actually maybe make it change, or I could shift my own perspective and then people start showing up different. I don't know, but
Accountability is tricky.
accountability and 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 influence, I think, is tricky,
Mhm.
right? I
Mhm.
think we're all professional manipulators, and I don't even say that in a negative way. I think it
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. We need to survive. We figure out ways of like,
Mm.
nudging someone along toward our outcome or whatever. But
Yeah.
influence is super important. In a presidential way, it's global impact, right? I don't
Mhm.
I may be amazing. I don't see that I have that impact currently. That's
I
fine.
see.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't, each of us, we may have a bigger or smaller sort of sphere of influence, but we are influencing the things and the people and the dynamics around
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah.
that's what we'll be looking at loosely in this next workshop. Um, and so I guess I do kind of two other things. One is we get a group of people together and we do kind of more traditional family systems
Hmm.
um, uh, workshops, although I am currently stepping into this as a full-time
Uh-huh.
job where it's been a part-time practice for me for a while. So
Hmm.
um a a I haven't built a network in Santa Fe in person that would work for a whole like weekend workshop, for example. I just
I
haven't
see.
done that yet. I think there's potential for that. I would love to do that. I have a few people who've talked about wanting to dive a little deeper and learn a little bit more about the facilitation process and
Mm.
also unpack, more layers of their experience. Um, but one-on-one, in person, and remote, I love working with people. I work with minerals, stones,
Ah, uh-huh.
um, various things, wood, pinon sap, like anything that has a little density that can hold space and
Hmm.
have maybe unique color or texture. There's like I have an abalone shell piece. I've got like all these different pieces
Got it.
um, that I build into a circle, and we can set up any constellation within that sort of here's the playing field. Let's say we're doing it over Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
for example. I work with clients remotely weekly, basically. Um, I would have a camera shooting
Ah.
overhead
Mm-hmm.
onto the constellation, onto the circle of stones, let's say. And then we would use the stones as representatives,
Yeah.
and both the client or the working participant and myself are looking at the relationships that are playing out. Okay,
Mm.
bring in a representative for your mother, let's say, and now bring in a representative for her mother. What is that dynamic like?
I
The same way
see.
you would check in with your own body, you're doing a little bit of transference to that stone and then checking in with the body.
Got it.
Um, and those are, I mean, just freaking. I feel like they're so rewarding. I just have been so fortunate to be like, oh my God, I don't know. I had no idea that this person was going to acknowledge and unlock
Uh-huh.
this thing for themselves. You
Yeah.
had mentioned a little bit of like, I'll say it from my perspective. I don't want to do anybody's work. I don't
Mm.
want to do anybody's work. I'm not a healer. I'm not going to say you come into the room and I'm going to guarantee this outcome for you because I'm this magical source that's just like doling out healing to people.
Uh-huh.
But I may actually ask you a question that allows you to approach your own experience differently, and that could feel like it is a healing for you. I will
Yeah.
say that I have that capacity. I feel comfortable enough now to say I can support unlocking in another person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it's their work. Then, like
Yep.
to your point, you get to go practice it.
Mm-hmm.
You get to go out in the world and
Yep.
stumble,
Yeah.
or really fly and really find that, oh my God, this resource that I've had next to me the whole time, I never just picked up and used it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now I have a little bit of a safe space where I practice using it, and it's pretty cool. I'm gonna go try it out and at the PTA meeting or whatever. I don't know what.
Fantastic.
Yeah, totally.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Lovely. Well, what's the means for people to engage with
Yeah.
you or
I would say that I actually just last week met with a friend of mine who's helping build a website.
Mm.
So in the near future, I will have a website that is available to you guys. And maybe at some point when this is published, we can link that on. But the best way to get to me would be my email, I think.
Okay,
And it's just w.miglino, Miglino, at gmail.com.
great.
First initial, period, last name. We can put it in the comments or the
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
good there.
and I'm okay with that. That is a place where
Hmm.
um, I like book Zoom meetings on there or whatever. People reach out to me. I love the discussion. So if
Hmm.
someone is like curious about,
Uh-huh.
you know, I I feel like the web of our conversation has been very diverse, and that's
Yeah.
fun for me. I'm okay. I also am okay doing a
Mm.
straight line sometimes. But I want to engage with people who are bringing curiosity to the table.
Hmm.
I feel like the potential for our evolution, even as someone who has studied some biological evolution, is like curiosity or the potential for something to shift is what
Hmm.
has driven our growth from
Mm.
a single cell to, you
Yeah.
know, wherever we are today, right?
Yeah.
Like these growths have come from a desire for new potential, a
Hmm.
desire or an opportunity for um, new relationship, for
Yeah.
example. And
Yeah.
that I could get into that all day, whether that's like working with some, collaborating with someone.
Hmm.
Um, I've been working with some organizations that are like approaching the work they're doing from a systems
Mm.
perspective, and it's just like it's so cool, man. If you could
Yeah.
see yourself as really being integral,
Hmm.
that is that's it's pretty huge. And
Yeah.
I think that it is somewhat prevalent that our sense of purpose um is flickering, let's just say,
Mm.
or is
Mm.
is not always really close to
Hmm.
um our day to day, our lived experience. Um and I think this is uh, I could say that losing my younger sister, she
Mm.
did pass along the journey,
Hmm.
um, helped bring me closer to living for purpose.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then the mechanisms of getting in touch with my own physical
Hmm.
and emotional body, as well as relating with others like yourself, whether
Yeah.
that's in a facilitative role or in friendship or
Yep.
as peers, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, that for me has evolved my relationship with my sense of purpose for sure.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Lovely.
it's a treat, you know.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and the poetry and how interesting your frequency as well as your words it aligns for me around, I think part of our process of disconnection is wanting to find our space back to home and inner home, I think is how we can connect to or be, I keep using the word aligned to that
Mm,
purpose.
sure.
Without that sense of inner home, I think purpose can be wonky. Almost like thinking about you as a choreographer or you as a dance instructor, right? If somebody doesn't have their center, how can
Right.
they do the plies? How can they do
Yep.
their, whatever they're aiming to do?
Hmm.
I was trying to be, I know
I
some
like
lingo.
that. No, no, no. And in dance class, I would use this kind of also somewhat tropey analogy, but like you're building the foundation of the building, and if you want the
Mhm.
building to be able to
Yep.
be erect, then you need that foundation
Yep.
uh, on a kind of like emotional, spiritual way, like what you're talking about. If And I feel for people. I know so many people who do not find safety in their own body alone.
Right. 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 Right.
Right? Like forget any other circumstance, right? And maybe even that people have a belief system that says that they can't find that or that they shouldn't or that they don't have a right to it or that
Yep.
I don't know, but that one thing. Um, I had a teacher, Hashisaki, who taught me an embodiment technique. I believe her teacher was Judith Blackstone, if I'm not mistaken. Um, where part of it was a really conscious finding of a safe place in our body,
Mm.
where we could inhabit our own physical form and find safety
Yep.
and find like an okay place to fall apart, an okay
Hmm.
place to be creative, an okay
Hmm.
place to express. Um, that the capacity for that, I believe, should be available
Mhm.
to anybody. I am
Yeah.
hopeful that it is available to anybody.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
life is
possible. Yeah, it's how we
life is
get there.
chaos. Yeah, right. I believe it should be possible that that's another side of the work that I do that I find to be incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
I will say that as a somewhat of a like hearty, mushy, whatever we were talking about before, but like also can be really masculine
Mhm.
male body. I have worked with women particularly who have dealt with trauma with men. I've
Mhm.
worked with men who have dealt with trauma with men. That's where my trauma comes from, to be honest.
Mhm.
Um, where it's like safe to like I want a person to be able to access their beauty and
Mhm.
grandeur and
Mhm.
their expression, and that we can go as I don't know if there I'm sure there are limits to this, but we can kind of go as far as a person needs to go
Mhm.
to get back in touch with
Yep.
that like self-trust,
Yeah.
that place of like, oh, I don't have to be vigilant always,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I think some people maybe have never
Mhm.
experienced an aspect of life where they didn't have to be protecting themselves in some way or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Thank you, dear. Thank
Oh,
you
it's
so
such a treat.
much.
And I just want to say that I am
Mm.
incredibly grateful for what you bring to the table,
Oh.
in your inquisitive nature and also your, I'll say beingness. I don't know the
Mm.
right way to say it exactly, but the way
Mm.
that you show up and you um one, you're you, which I
Mm.
really appreciate. But you're also not fixed.
Mhm.
You're like, oh, we're flowing in this moment. Let's flow in this moment. I
Mhm.
think that's really beautiful to witness. So thank you for
Oh,
your participation in that
thank you.
way
Thanks for
and for
reflecting it.
picking out uh this dialogue and finding
Mm.
these connection points, creating the platform you're creating.
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
stoked. Stoked
Yeah.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
it's my pleasure.
Thank you.